Hello and welcome. In this episode, we have a one-on-one interview with the Managing Director of Oil Search, Peter Botten, who shares his company's insight on PNG's HIV epidemic and what Oil Search is doing in the national response against HIV and AIDS, including the significance of the public-private partnership system. Thank you, Mr. Botten, for taking time for this interview. In your view, how do you see the HIV epidemic in the country? Do you think it's getting worse or better? And what is an oil and gas company doing in the national response against HIV and AIDS?
Well, firstly, HIV AIDS is a problem in PNG. At the moment, I think estimates put that about 0.7% of the population have been identified with the disease. And although that may not seem a large number in the totality of a 7.5 million population, it's a disease that is insidious. It affects many, many more people. And I'm sure if you tested everybody in the country, the numbers would be significantly higher than that 0.7%. Over the last few years, the National Department of Health and the government working with the provinces have addressed HIV, and the numbers have definitely come down. The number of tests carried out have gone up dramatically, and there is a much better understanding of the disease now than there was a few years ago. The involvement of an oil and gas company in helping government manage the HIV disease, in my view, is fundamental. Oil Search is a Papua New Guinea company. It's PNG's biggest company. It has a very substantial interest in the oil business and also the LNG business. And we have operations in many parts of the country which has a prevalence of HIV. And being a responsible corporate citizen, we believe the private sector, Oil Search, as well as other companies in the private sector, should be standing up and helping government address some of these challenges. And that's what we've been doing for the last few years through our Oil Search Health Foundation.
Which parts of PNG does the problem seem worse? And do you think that polygamy is a contributing factor to the spread of HIV and AIDS?
Well, there's no doubt that the reality is PNG has got, in parts, some relatively promiscuous sexual habits, right? And that certainly contributes to the prevalence of the disease and how it spreads around the country. In reality, that's a factor that has deep cultural roots, and it's something that we clearly have to bear in mind when you're trying to manage it. Again, there are a number of parts of the country which we think are probably have higher burden of the disease. Port Moresby is certainly one of those. We also think parts of the Highlands and where we work in Hela is also an area which has got a heavy burden of this disease, which we're addressing through a number of the programs that we have going on.
The National Research Institute has confirmed that close to 85% of PNG's population is rural-based. Do you think that more HIV and AIDS education and awareness needs to be injected in that area?
Oh, there's no doubt that part of the management program for the disease is actually an understanding. It's about education, it's about telling the people what HIV is about, what it means, what its impact is, and about how it can be stopped or at least addressed. That is about education. It's about getting out amongst the people. It's about telling them the real story. There's obviously a lot of stigma attached in parts of the community about HIV, and again, education forms part of the way that we address that. And there's no doubt going out to the villages away from the big cities is a very important part of helping the whole country address HIV.
Mr. Botten, the resources sector are sometimes blamed for spreading this disease because of pockets of wealth and prosperity. Would you accept that proposition?
Look, there's no doubt that there are pockets of relative wealth around the country that are driven by the presence of a resource project. And again, as a major resource owner and a major resource participant in the country, we recognise that that's a factor. And we also recognise that we have to do something about it, and that's why the Health Foundation is operating and our medical programs have been operating in the communities for many, many years, not just addressing HIV, but also malaria, child maternal health issues, and a range of fundamental basic health challenges in our communities. We have to do that. It's a moral obligation as well as a business imperative.
Stay tuned. We'll take a look at the achievements of the Oil Search Health Foundation and its participation in the 20th International AIDS Conference. That's coming up after the break. Welcome back. If you just joined us, we're looking at Oil Search's assistance in the fight against HIV and AIDS in PNG. For the first time, the 20th International AIDS Conference will be staged in the Oceania region, and we'll also see the participation of Oil Search. But before that, Mr. Botten explains the operations of the Oil Search Health Foundation. The Oil Search Health Foundation was started in 2011 and has come a long way since its inception. In your view, what are some of the key highlights that the foundation has achieved?
Well, there are a number of those. I mean, firstly, expanding our footprint across the country away from our traditional operating areas has been a highlight. So we recognise that the challenges of health and health delivery are not just around Kutubu or Hides, they're across the rest of the country as well. And so moving out from our traditional bases where we have operations has been a major step forward for the foundation. I think also playing a role with government, with NGOs, the churches, a range of people to bring the talent set and the skills that we have in the private sector to work with the government, work with the churches, work with the NGOs, I think has delivered a much better health outcome and a more efficient health outcome for a dollar than if we worked individually on our own in addressing these challenges. So again, a range of positive impacts in HELA on HIV, malaria eradication in parts of our operating areas have all been contributed by the company and the Health Foundation and are significant achievements in my view.
Mr. Botten, would you say that there are too many agencies concentrating on the same issues like malaria, TB and HIV, etc., etc.? Are there plans to branch out into more specialized areas of medicine?
Look, I think the reality is that there are problems of malaria, there are problems of HIV, there's TB problems. In this country, there are many challenges in terms of health delivery and addressing those health challenges. So, in my view, there can't be enough people involved in addressing it until you have those diseases under control. We clearly, in part, have that under control. The government does, and the NDOH has. But in reality, there are more challenges with such a fast-growing population, vast rural areas to cover. And the more people we can get involved in health and delivering good health services, the better, in my view. How we coordinate that effort is the challenge. And as I say, I'm a great believer that the private sector should play a role, a much greater role in working with the National Department of Health, working with the churches, the NGOs, to help bring their skills and their footprint on the land, their actual operations on the land, and help the logistics and the total program aided by the private sector. I think that's a very positive move, and certainly it's something we firmly believe in.
Oil Search has recently announced a platinum sponsorship for the 20th International AIDS Conference that will begin on Monday, the 20th of July in Melbourne. What do you aim to gain from this conference?
Well, firstly, AIDS 2014 is the world's largest HIV/AIDS conference. It's held every 2 years, and for the first time it's been held in Oceania. It's obviously being held in Australia, in Melbourne, in late July, and as the nearest neighbour to Australia and as probably the largest, or the country with the largest number of HIV positive people in the region, having PNG there, having the health workers, having people who actually live with HIV, having a number of PNG stakeholders go down meet with people from around the world who deal with HIV, the research people, the other health workers working in different countries from around the world, gaining from their experiences and passing our experiences from PNG to them, I think is a great communication forum for us to learn and demonstrate how PNG has done its work in addressing HIV/AIDS. It's also a piece of PNG. We have, I think, over 40 PNG delegates going down that we're sponsoring. And it's a great tool to present the country and present what actually happens in the country in a very positive way and learn from other people's experience. So we're very much looking forward to the conference. We're taking a part of PNG down. We're taking some hoolies, which will go, I'm sure, very well in Melbourne climate in winter. That'll be a challenge for them. We're also taking some PNG music and some PNG culture down. So Paddy Potstoy is also coming down and giving some performance. So there'll be a little piece of PNG in a very large conference, estimated to have over 14,000 delegates. And we're proud to say what we're doing up here, but we're also very, very keen to learn from other people's work from around the world.
Sounds like it's going to be a learning experience as well as an enjoyable one.
Well, hopefully it certainly will be a learning experience, and I'm sure there'll be some part of PNG, and I hope there'll be some PNG people from Melbourne that will come and get involved, because we'll certainly be flying the flag.
We'll be back with more after these short messages. Welcome back to the show. In this segment, Oil Search Managing Director Peter Botten speaks about the significance of the public-private partnership mechanism and how more can be done by the private sector to efficiently implement service delivery in PNG. Mr. Botten, you spoke earlier about the commitment of Oil Search in giving back to the communities of PNG. Now I'd like to take you a bit wider and hope you can give your insight on the potential role of the private sector in international aid and development.
Well, I believe firmly that the private sector needs to step up and help deliver aid in an efficient, effective way. I think traditionally aid has gone into a range of bodies, government bodies, NGOs, churches, all of which have been, I think, pretty positive. There is some learning out of that and some improvements to be made. But where the gap has been, in my view, is that the private sector has not stepped up to help governments, churches, NGOs in the aid delivery process. And I think as a major PNG company receiving significant revenues from PNG LNG and the oil business, it's time that Oil Search stepped up and put some money back into the community, put our expertise working to work with the government, work with the churches, work with the NGOs and all stakeholders in ensuring that aid gets delivered properly, that there are proper governance processes around it, and leveraging our skills in project management, in our presence on the ground to help in the aid dynamics. And I would encourage all private sector companies, especially ones in the resources sector, to look at how they can help in this process. We're all aware that PNG, with PNG LNG moving forward, the population is expecting service delivery, and government are making strides to deliver services. But if you're looking at the expectations of the people about provision of hospitals, schools, roads, power, the private sector must help and step up and help government to deliver these, what I think to be basic services across the nation, not just in the resources areas, but across the whole country. And that's something I think Oil Search will play a role in with government, already is playing a role with government, but it also should be expanded out to significant parts of the private sector to use their skills to work with government and deliver services in a much more effective way than in the past.
Mr. Botten, you mentioned that corporate organizations and agencies need to pull up their socks in giving back more to the country. Do you think that the public-private partnership system needs to be more efficient to actually get them in to do that?
I think a lot of people actually are very sympathetic to being involved, and I think a lot of companies actually don't know how to get involved and don't see a system or process which allows them to be involved in an effective way. I think on the other side too, there's also suspicion in certain quarters about, well, why is an oil and gas company doing this stuff? And I think there's a compelling business reason as well as obvious moral reasons for us to be involved in this area. Firstly, the business reason is I'm sure that if in 5, 6, 7, 10 years' time, the population in Papua New Guinea has not seen significant improvement in service delivery, the operating environment for our businesses will deteriorate very quickly. So firstly, if we want a business in Papua New Guinea and a growing business, as we do in Papua New Guinea, it's in our interest to help government and all stakeholders deliver these services. And we're going to do that. We've got a very strong working relationship with the government, and we're working on a number of infrastructure projects as well as health projects to help government deliver these things. What I'm saying is I think other parties need to be involved as well. And if we get it right, we have a great moral, social outcome, but we also have a stable operating environment in the future. So working in partnership, we can actually deliver some great results rather than working individually, which I think will be less efficient.
After the break, we continue to explore the importance of the public-private partnership from Oil Search's perspective. Stay tuned. In our final segment, Mr. Botten further encourages the private sector to actively give back to the community, and he also shares Oil Search's response as being the second corporate organization in the world to administer funds received from the Global Fund. I'd like to go back to what you previously said about the proactive participation of the corporate sector as not only being needed but also an obligation. This statement seems to echo the recent announcement by the Australian government of its new aid paradigm, which is designed to put greater emphasis on the role of the private sector. Can you explain how and where Oil Search fits in this new paradigm?
Well, as I've mentioned already, I think the private sector does need to step up, does need to be involved in service delivery and specifically helping the delivery of efficient aid programs. I think that's not been done particularly well in the past, and certainly the Australian government new policy on aid mentions and discusses the involvement of the private sector and what are true private-public partnerships. I'm a believer in that model. I don't think it works everywhere. I think there are parts where government needs to deliver money to government and there needs to be that dynamic continue. There also needs to be an involvement by the private sector, as I've said, and I think there are compelling reasons why. So I'm a believer in that model. I don't think it works everywhere, but I do think it's part of the future picture to improve aid delivery and to ensure that the aid is effective in where it goes.
Mr. Botten, Oil Search has been trusted with money from the Global Fund to implement health programs in the country in partnership with the government of PNG. It is believed that this is only one of 2 instances in the world. The other is Shell in the Philippines, where a company rather than a government is trusted with administering the fund's payments. What are your remarks on that?
Well, firstly, it's unusual for the private sector to be involved as a primary recipient for donor funds from Global Fund. It is unusual in the world, and certainly Shell is an example where another company has been a primary recipient and done some great work in malaria eradication in the Philippines. And over the last 2 years, Oil Search has been a primary recipient for Global Fund. We're presently going through a process looking at future programs under a difficult funding environment. The economy of the world is not as good as it was a few years ago, and therefore the level of donors and size of donations are much less now. So working with the National Department of Health and the Country Coordination Committee, undoubtedly Oil Search will be discussing along with our partners, churches, NGOs, etc., how we can make best use of the funding that does come from Global Fund in the future. We also will be I believe, putting more money into the system through the Health Foundation and other areas. But it's a tough environment for everybody at the moment. Though I say that from where also it sits with PNG LNG revenues coming in, we do believe we can help and should help more. And that's what we're doing. I should also stress we're not just in health, we're also in various infrastructure projects that we're working with governments. We're helping using government tax credits to refurbish Mariah House, the Pineapple Building. We're also refurbishing and rebuilding Lloyd Robson Oval. We're doing a number of projects in infrastructure, including roads in Southern Highlands and Hela. We've got a range of tax credit projects working with government to help them deliver some of the core infrastructure and some capacity building in various departments to help improve the knowledge base in those areas so that government can take over many of these issues into the future. So it's not just about health, it's also about, again, infrastructure, which we think is a key to service delivery and economic improvement across the whole country.
Well, that's all we have for tonight on Resource PNG. If you have any queries or suggestions or simply want to know more about the program, do email us on this email address, resourcepng@emtv.com.pg, or check MTV online, that's www.emtv.com.pg, and go to our Resource PNG page. Until another edition of Resource PNG, it's bye for now.